so excited today to be bringing you a story about a C student who does good, a Black man starting in the 80s and navigating his career to be on a Fortune 500 board of directors, to be in the C-suites of major, major companies, and to give you advice about how he managed to do it and how he advises people today coming up the ranks who are looking to him for support and mentoring and sponsorship, what he tells them. So you get to be whispering in the ear, hearing the advice of Keith Wyche. Keith, thank you so much for joining me today.
Bonnie, thank you so much for having me.
So I'm assigning in my courses your book, Good Is Not Enough. I know you've written several books since then as well. Tell me the story of how did Good Is Not Enough get written? What made you write it?
It's great. It's an interesting story. So years ago, 2003, I was president of Pitney Bowes U.S. operations. And typically we'd sponsor a lot of events like Urban League Luncheons or National Black MBA. And part of that sponsorship required, hey, here's a 2 to 3 minute commercial you can do for Pitney Bowes. And I decided rather than talk about Pitney Bowes for those 2 to 3 minutes, to have a room full of young Black professionals, I would talk about things that were meaningful in the workplace, how to deal with a difficult boss, how to get your name out there. And so after about 3 or 4 years of doing this, I was actually approached by John Maxwell and Jack Canfield. Jack Canfield is the gentleman who wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. John Maxwell is that leadership guru. And they said, hey, guy, we've been on the road with you and people want to talk to you more than they talk to us. You might want to write a book. And so long story short, through a guy named George Fraser, I got introduced to a literary agent and we shopped the idea for Good Is Not Enough and had 3 offers and got a 3-book deal from Penguin. So it was a great story, but I'm the accidental author.
Not really though, because what I hear is you had a heart for helping people, not just, doing an ad that you were assigned to do, but you said, I gotta share. So you had a passion for this subject. And
yeah, I did have a passion for the subject, and it's really kind of a purpose. And it goes back to, Bonnie, I got into corporate America in 1980 after graduating, and there were not a lot of folks who looked like me in corporate America. And even the ones that were there weren't really open to help. It was almost like crabs in the barrel. And so I promised myself, if I ever had any success in corporate America, that I would take whatever those lessons were to help those folks who came after me. Because to me, a true leader creates other leaders. And so that was really my mission, my passion, and my purpose to this day.
Oh, I love it. We always have our final project is our pay it forward project, and so that's very much in our DNA of what we do as well. I wanted you to talk a little bit about telling and selling your value. And a lot of people in our courses say, well, my work should speak for itself. I work hard, I do great work. It should be rewarded, right? I shouldn't have to play games and play politics. But in your book, Good Is Not Enough. Keep wanting to say Good Is Not Enough. You specifically call out several ways that leaders can derail by not understanding and documenting the expectations in their job, not quantifying the value to their company, not demanding honest feedback and guidance. So all of those feed into the performance review process, and are you engaging proactively in that process, not just letting your work speak for itself? Tell us a little bit about what you wrote and then maybe what the update is, what you've learned since the book came out.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is based upon how we grew up academically. And so think about from when you were in kindergarten and you could count to 100 or you knew your colors, you got a gold star and it was performance based. As you went to high school, junior high school, depending upon your grade point average, you were honor roll, merit roll, what have you. Everything was really based upon your performance, where someone recognizes your performance and you get rewarded. The real world does not work that way. And what I mean by that is performance is still essential. You've got to be a top performer. But sadly, you can be a top performer in the same role for 40 years if you're not careful. It's exposure and perception. Who knows you? What do they know about you? And what is your personal brand? And too often, if you only focus on the performance piece of that and you wait for someone to recognize you, you can be in trouble. Early in my career, I was a sales rep at IBM, and I was one of the better sales reps.
I was too. I was a sales rep at IBM too.
There you go. And so I had a boss who had no incentive to promote me because as a sales rep at IBM selling $1 million mainframes, it was in his best interest and his team's best interest to keep me as a salesperson. And so performance was there, but wasn't getting the recognition, wasn't getting the upward mobility, and actually was why I left IBM at the time. But again, it requires the fact that you have great performance, but also that people know that, and that's where I talk about one-on-one feedback. Making sure that your manager, your immediate supervisor understands what you bring to the table, and I don't wait for a year in review to do
Hey,
that.
just before you move on from that, you mentioned that you left IBM because you felt like you were knocking it out of the park, but you were never going to move up. And if you had it to do over again, you probably could have turned that situation around, right? So because this happens a lot, right? Is people leave because they feel like I'm not moving up, but what really happened is they didn't know how to engage the system, right?
That's you're 1,000% correct. I was probably late 20s, early 30s at that time, and was still kind of in that performance mode of mindset that, hey, you should recognize me. I'm one of your top salespeople. What I didn't understand at that point was the importance of relationships within the organization. What I didn't understand at that point was the articulation of what my desires are from a development plan standpoint. What I didn't understand is that you are really the owner, the author, and the architect of your career. And you have to empower yourself to do that, not sit and wait on others. And so that's when I was, sadly to say, kind of sitting and waiting, where if I had to do over again, there were things I could have done to position myself.
So how do you tell people about your achievements? Make sure that people see your achievements, as you said, without bragging or without seeing like, your how do you do that? A lot of people are uncomfortable, especially, and especially I find minorities and women are very uncomfortable with it because it feels like bragging. It feels inappropriate. Some cultures, Hispanic culture or Asian culture says, you don't do that. So what's the appropriate way to do it?
That's a great thing. And one of the things I do, the initial one is also making sure, again, your immediate supervisor knows. But what I like to do is talk about and share team successes. Even to this day, when I'm on a team or when I'm leading a team, even if it was my influence or persuasion, when I talk about that story, when I tell people, it's all about, hey, let me tell you what the team has done. Because inadvertently, I'm really telling you what my role is and how I helped it, but I'm taking the focus off of me and putting it on the team. And I found that's very successful because then people want to hear more about, hey, how did you do that, right? And so one, I always try and make it about the team. The other thing is, and this is going to sound corny, but you still always need to have that elevator pitch for that time that you might run into a senior leader in the elevator or run into that senior leader in the parking lot who may or may not know you well and ask you what you do. You need to have a very concise, kind of value added story about here's who you are and here's what you do for the organization.
And I say too, it shouldn't just be an elevator pitch, but a sound bite, which means it's constantly updated. So you can say, here's what I've accomplished, but here's what I'm working on that's exciting, or here's the value I'm about to deliver, right? And you talk
Absolutely.
about quantifying it too. And you give great examples in your book. And I assign your book in my course. I highly recommend people go out and buy the book, but because you give great examples of being vague when you're telling about your achievements is not helpful. Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, some roles lend themselves very easily to measurement. So if you're a salesperson or you manage a P&L, it's pretty easy to keep score. I had a young lady who was in HR approach me not too long ago, and she says, "Well, what can I do to talk about and quantify my value?" So I said, "Well, give me some responsibilities." And one of her responsibilities was hiring. And one of the things she was proud of is she reduced the time to hire from 28 days to 14 days. And I said, even if you can't put a monetary number on that, the fact that you cut that by 50% and she goes, wow, I never thought of it that way. And so again, for most of us, there's something that we do in our role that we can quantify. It may not be dollars, it could be percentages, but something that speaks to, hey, here's what happened. I run a call center and guess what? My average call time dropped from 2 minutes to a minute, 30 seconds. I mean, those are things that, you may think are second nature, but those things help quantify your value.
And also the impact, and I'm sure you counsel people on that too, is not to just say what you did, but what is the impact for the company's ability to compete or the company's ability to deliver value to customer. What is it? Not people didn't list what they did, but why does it matter? How do you advise people to convey that better?
It's funny. And you said something that's great. When I advise and talk to the folks that I mentor, I say one of the things that every company is looking for, every organization, is that person who has thought leadership. That person who's thinking not just about their role or their function, but where the organization is going. And so, I tell them when you go to a town hall meeting or a company meeting, come prepared with 1 to 2 really thought-provoking business-related questions or industry-related questions that will really say a few things about you. So I did one of these a few weeks ago at my company, and we're in the retail space. And so one of my proteges got up and said, "Hey, we seem to be in this new omni-channel environment because of the pandemic, and people are buying things more online. How are we preparing for that?" The senior leadership loved it because, again, it gave an example of here's someone who isn't thinking about their individual role. They're thinking in the broader context of the industry and the company and how we can do better. And companies are always looking to promote those folks who are looking to add value and make the corporation better.
I love that. And it underscores too, in this time of so much transformation and flux, and we've got pandemic and protests and things going on. A lot of people want to just keep their head down and say, let's wait for it all to be over. But what you're talking about is showing leadership in a time of transformation. And this is what companies need. It's an opportunity to show your value and grow.
Yeah,
And
these are
so
uncharted territories that none of us ever seen before. And I found that it's times like these that people can actually make their mark in their career and leadership, opportunities present themselves to those folks who are ready for it and not afraid.
that's great. Another thing I want to double click on is that you said about getting feedback. And we all know for women and minorities, it's often difficult for us to get really honest feedback. And it can be just that there's a discomfort there, or fear of lawsuit, or me too, or, there's so many reasons why people don't always give us honest feedback. What do you advise your mentees about that?
Yeah, I tell them the first thing is feedback is a gift, but you have to make the giver comfortable giving it. And so in my particular case, even to this day, Bonnie, when I take a new role or I get a new leader, the first thing I tell them is I am a sponge for feedback. And so I will come ask for it often and, let them know, put them on these, I accept it. Now, once you make that claim, you have to live up to it. And what I mean by that is there's 3 types of feedback that we typically get. It's positive feedback that we agree with. There's negative feedback that we may not like, but we agree, yeah, I need to improve in that area. Those are easy. The challenge is, what do you do when you get that feedback that maybe you don't see or you don't understand or you don't agree with?
Or you
And that's
even
where,
know it's wrong.
yeah,
There's all of that, right?
yeah, and what most people do mistakenly is they get defensive and push back and argumentative. The minute you do that, you have just lost an advocate. You have just lost someone, particularly if you're a person of color or woman, you may have just lost someone who's going to be open enough to give you that real feedback. And so what I tell the folks I mentor, and I live it in my life, is when you get feedback that you either don't understand or don't agree with, ask a few questions. So, for example, give me an example of when I do that, or how do I look when I do that? Because I find that that's when you can get more granular with the perception of what it is as opposed to the reality. And if you don't mind, I'll just use a quick story from my career. When I
Please.
was at Pitney Bowes, I used to go around the country doing these town hall meetings, and our chief people officer called me in and said, "Hey, I'm getting feedback that when you go out to all these, communities in these districts, that you really spend most of your time talking to the Black people." Now, again, my initial reaction was I knew for a fact that was not true. But rather than debate the point, I said, "Well, did they give you some examples of that?" And she said, "Sure. You were at a town hall recently and there was a lunch afterwards, and at your table, there were only Black people. 2 days before that, you were somewhere speaking, and there was a breakfast meeting, and folks came." And what I realized was their perception, that noise was out there because just looking outside in, yeah, I'm sitting at a table, all Black people. What I had to understand is, one, I was the highest ranking Black man, Black person at Walmart, at Pitney Bowes at the time. And that when I went somewhere, Black people would gravitate to me. And so I had to make sure going forward that when I went out, I didn't allow myself to be in a situation where I'm at one table. So what I would do is I wouldn't eat lunch at a table. I would walk around the room, spend 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there. Now I gained 20 pounds because I ate so much. But within 3 to 6 months, that perception disappeared. And so again, when you get feedback that you don't agree with or you don't understand, take the time to say, "Hey, give me an example of when I behave that way. What does that look like?" And then you can address it if it's real or if it's imaginary and it's a perception issue you have to address.
Now, even in the case where they're saying something and you know it's wrong, I mean, and you almost never know for sure, so you should always clarify. But say you really know it's wrong, you still don't want to correct it in the moment, right? You want to
No.
you how do you do? You correct it later? Like, what do you do?
What you do is you ask for that feedback, and then you say, you know what, let me look into that. Let me, do some more digging. Let me talk to some folks who work with me. Let me get some more perspective on that. And then once you have that perspective and you go back, you can at least talk to, hey, here's what I found. Here's what I understood. It really wasn't that I was. The perception was I was only talking to the Black people, but here's the reason why. Here's the rationale. And oh, by the way, here's what I'm going to do to correct that perception.
Right.
Because perception is reality. I call it noise, but again, it's reality until you address it.
Yeah. So on this whole topic of how you toot your own horn and get honest feedback and quantify your achievements and your impact, all these things. What have you learned lately? I love that it's clear that you're always learning, and you say you're not, even though you are the big dog on the block, you're always learning. What are you still learning about this? What would you want people to know that you didn't get a chance to write in any of your books?
I talk about it, but I didn't get a chance to write about it. And that is at the end of the day, um, we don't grow unless two things happen. One, we maintain what I call intellectual curiosity, which means you are always learning. You're a continuous learner. And B, I really think early on in the book, I underestimated the importance of people helping you navigate your career. No one breaks the glass ceiling on their own. Someone who's already on the other side of that glass ceiling has to see you, recognize your value, and help pull you through. And when I first wrote the book, again, that was 2008, it's 12 years ago, it was almost of the mindset that I could do this on my own. But the reality of it is, it's important that you have people on this journey, particularly folks who believe in you, know you, and sponsor you, because you need someone in that room who I call wearing your T-shirt.
Oh, I
Uh,
love that. Oh, wait. Okay. Tell the t-shirt story. I love that.
the T-shirt story. So there was a cartoon that I saw once that there was a gentleman and his young lady walking together, and he had a T-shirt on that said "Damn, I'm great," and she looked at him kind of side eye. Within the next stanza, it was her wearing a T-shirt saying "Dang, he's great." And what I mean by that is that there are meetings that take place in your organization, succession planning meeting, special project meeting, promotional meetings, where people are talking about who might be right for this role. And that is the meeting where you need someone in that room wearing your T-shirt who says, you know what, Bonnie would be great for this role, and let me tell you why. Or have you considered Keith for that role? He's done a great job here, why, and there. You need someone wearing your T-shirt because you can't wear the T-shirt that says I'm great.
It's better when somebody else is saying it for you. And so you want to equip
Absolutely.
people to do that. That's what this is all about, is equipping other people to do that. And with some women, they even make agreements with each other, is, hey, we're in different parts of the organization. Let's talk each other up so that our brand goes, across the company. And, we can be intentional about that. So
Absolutely. And
I
intentional is
love that.
important.
Is
Yes.
about encouraging other people to wear your t-shirt. And that means wearing the t-shirt of others, right? Is helping to toot the horn
Absolutely.
of other people too. And so we can definitely do that and be more proactive. What's interesting, when I said, what's different about this? And you said you need to engage more people and more support. Now that you're in the top job or one of the top jobs, you must be doing that for a lot more people. So you're seeing it from the other side, right? It's the impact you can have on other people's careers. We talk a lot about sponsorship. So from the perception of a sponsor, what are some of the things that women and minorities in particular need to do better to engage more sponsorship?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I laugh because I had a young lady reach out to me a week ago who applied for a job at my company and wanted me to sponsor her when I knew very little about her. The reality of it is that a sponsorship relationship or someone who's going to advocate on your behalf, there has to be a level of knowledge, trust, and confidence they have in you and your ability. And that doesn't happen overnight. Uh, and it only happens from a visibility standpoint, when you have a personal brand that talks about your abilities to deliver results, when it talks about your teamwork skills, people have to know something about you, or you have to know someone who knows someone. And so that's why I said earlier on the importance of people may have been missed when I wrote the book in 2008. And it's making sure that I have that professional network, and that if Bonnie's a senior leader and she knows my work, that I somehow make sure Bonnie could possibly introduce me to Lynn, it's that type of relationship, because no one, hear me well, no one is going to expend their personal capital and risk their own brand to wear your t-shirt if they're not confident in who you are and what you can deliver.
So give me some examples. How do I get you comfortable with wearing my t-shirt?
They're little things. I mean, one of the things I've done for years, and I still do even, is people like thought leadership. And so to this day, if I see an industry related article, or if I see something in the news that I think a senior leader, either on the supply chain side or my CEO even, might find interesting, would send them a clip or a link to that article. Hey, thought you might find this interesting. Hey, because again, it's showing thought leadership. It shows you're thinking about the business. The other thing is, again, when I do have team successes, making sure that, hey, I want to highlight some folks on my team who did a great job this. Yes, you're highlighting the people on your team, but intuitively, we all know that there's a leader of that team, and that's you. And so again, when enough people know about you, and these things can take time, it's not like you can join the organization 1 month and 3 months later they know everything about you. So understand that this isn't a microwave situation, but if you create that body of work of being an intellectually curious person, someone who's thinking thought leadership thoughts beyond their role or beyond what's happening today, leaders like folks like that, and they're more than willing to then step up. And last but not least, never shy away from an opportunity for exposure. And what I mean by that is, if you are at these company meetings, introduce yourself to some of the power players. But you have to have a meaningful, to your point, elevator pitch about what you're doing and what you plan to do, because again, those are make or break moments.
Yeah. And actually, one thing I've heard is in those moments that, okay, so I was talking to a woman executive, and she said, when a man has, 10 minutes with me or comes into my office and has an informational meeting, he tells me all about himself, what he's going to do and how great he is. And, will you help me move forward? When a woman comes in, she asks me all about myself and my life and my family and my career choices. And I feel great. But when she's left, I don't know how great she is. And that not 100% of the time, but that happens a lot. Do you notice that too?
I notice that women are great nurturers, and they tend to put others before themselves. And so I do think that, there are times when you have to be somewhat selfish, and make sure that your needs are getting met, and that your desires are getting met. And so please don't stop being that nurturer. In fact,
Well, I
I
was going
see
to
it.
say though, isn't there a balance though? Is if we
That's it.
go in and we ask nothing about you and just say, "Hey, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great. Hey, you drive my, wear my t-shirt." Uh, Actually, men might be able to get away with that. I'm not even sure women can get away with that. So, how do we strike a balance between asking you about yourself when I'm at that cocktail party and you said, make sure you go and you talk to them and you get that exposure? How do I sort of balance asking them some questions about what they're doing and also, telling them my elevator pitch?
Yeah, I have found with most people that, if I ask you some questions about yourself, very soon you'll flip back and ask that about me. When I was an old salesperson at IBM, you might remember this, I'd go into a client's office, I'd look around, if there's their golf pictures, family pictures, what have you, something to kind of kick that conversation off. And invariably they'd ask me something about me. And so I think, the difference is, again, most men, we can be me, 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 me. But for women, when you go in, there's nothing, because people want people who are personable. They want people who appear to have concern for others. But very quickly you need to turn it in you, and don't be ashamed to ask that, have that conversation about your thoughts, your needs, your ideas. Men have no problem having those conversations.
Yeah. And again, these are stereotypes. So I do want to say not all women
Sure,
are one way, not all men are one way, but
absolutely.
it is informative when you look at the data. What about informal networking? In the age of Me Too and everything that's going on, can I ask you about, do you have kids, or how do I get, because that's part of building trust too. It's not just going goal, 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 but I need to feel like I know you as a person, right?
That is so true. And in fact, I'll tell you, one of the things that probably hindered my career early on, and again, I'm an old school guy, is that I grew up with the adage of, hey, I'm going to work to work. You don't need to know my family life, personal life, how many kids, any of that. And what I learned, Bonnie, is to some degree, and I'm never going to be a fan of bring your whole self to work, but I do think you need to bring enough of yourself to work that people can relate to you, right? And so, and there's certain areas that are pretty safe. Kids, significant others, for the most part. Do I stay away from politics? Absolutely. Do I stay away from religion? Absolutely. But it's also part of just kind of why I read so much of what I read to stay current. If nothing else, I can, hey, how about those Cowboys? But the reality of it is that people do connect on a personal level, and people do need to know something about you to
Well, it
feel
makes them feel
comfortable.
like they know your values, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah, so we talk a lot about informal networking. And again, that can be a barrier for women or minorities. If there's differences, that it's harder for people to feel like they know you. And so being intentional about bridging some of those gaps, or giving the other person to permission space to ask you about who you are. Otherwise, you've got, I say excessive politeness can kill careers. So you want to.
Absolutely. And you want to look for those commonalities. And so, people come to my office or they come to see me and, oh, you're a Cowboys fan. Oh, I mean, it opens up that communication to talk about so many other things, right? Because at the end of the day, Bonnie, we're all people. And I have found male, female, black, white, whatever, we have so much more in common than we actually realize if we just spend the time to get to know a little something about each other.
We have a wide diversity of folks in our classes, women, men, Hispanic, Black, Asian, all and global as well. But I'm going to pull you in, and as a Black man, what are some of the unique things about being a Black man and climbing the corporate ladder? And you can give that advice both to help Black men who are listening, but also to help other people who are listening, be a better inclusive leader too. And actually, I was talking to you before in another call, and I one of the examples you gave of that was that society teaches people to be scared of Black men, so you have to spend some time making people less scared of you. I mean, that's just outrageous to me.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who all they know about Black men are what they see in the media, on television, on cops, what have you. And so if you did not grow up around that, if you did not, know real Black people, it's sad but understandable that you have these perceptions, right? And so, before I walk into a room, or when I walk into a room, the first thing they see is that I'm a big bald head Black man with a deep voice, that's over 220 pounds, right? And if you're not comfortable with that, if you've only known that in one environment, so one of the things that I've had to do my whole career, and this is where some of my millennial partners and I part ways, is I always had felt the need to make people comfortable with me, right? Uh, and it goes back to, again, I'll use IBM. I dressed the IBM way: blue suit, red tie, white button-down shirt, because I wanted to fit in. Um, you know, Even to this day, my voice, I have to be careful because um, when I get passionate about a subject, it can come off as aggressive, right? I'm very figurative with my hands and my gestures. And so I've had to learn over the years in certain environments to kind of tone that down. Sadly, and we see it play out in criminal justice, we see it play out, with Black Lives Matter, that there is a inherent fear quite often of Black men. That we just face when we walk into a room. And, it doesn't matter if you're from Harvard with a PhD or you're from Harvard Avenue in Cleveland. Uh, but the reality of it is you need to be aware of it, just so you can address it if you have to face it.
I was at a C-suite cocktail party, and one of my mentees was a Black male, and I was trying to introduce him to some of the C-suite members of his own company, which I knew and had a relationship with, and I was trying to pull him in, and he was hanging back so much at the cocktail party. I asked him later, and he said it was that thing. He's so big that he's been told if he literally leans into the conversation, he's physically towering over people. And I have the opposite problem. I'm 5'2". I'm so short. At cocktail parties, people talk over my head. So we have different challenges. a parallel to what you're saying too, I think, with you have to compensate by trying to make sure people feel comfortable and not scared of you because of society's perceptions. In the with the new Me Too issues, what a lot of times is if you have a woman who wants you to mentor or sponsor her, and she's trying to develop that informal relationship with you, and go out for a drink after work, there can be perceptions. I knew one woman who even said she used to sit next to her boss at meetings, and he would, whisper little comments in her ear, and everybody decided they were having an affair because he was, making comments to her. And so they had to decide not to sit next to each other at meetings, to dispel this perception. Are there any other advice you can give to women about if a woman is coming to you and wanting you to be a sponsor or mentor, what are things she can do to make it easier for you to do that? How can she be thoughtful about not making you look like a Me Tooer? Is that it? This is
Yeah,
such a sensitive subject because nobody wants you to blame the victim, but help me.
yeah, and it's funny because I look at that totally different. Again, I have two adult daughters in their 30s who are professional, and I don't. The onus should not be on her.
Right.
And so my response is going to be, as a male mentor, is there things I can do to make it comfortable for her? So, for example, any meetings that I have scheduled or mentor sessions, they're done through my administrative assistant, right? It's not she and I directly, so there's an intermediary. I do not have, and I've never done this, closed door meetings in my office with people of the opposite sex, just for the reason of optics, right? I tend to not do the after hour cocktail unless it's a group environment. Again, the perceptions that you have to manage are
Wait.
important.
What's frustrating there, just to stop you too, is you can do it with men, but you shouldn't do it with women. And the closed door, like, can you have a closed door meeting with a man, but you can't with a woman? Is that the way it is?
I would say, even to this day, even closed door sessions with men, I tend to not believe in, I have open door. There's issues there with men and, issues on top of that. So to me, it's just being as transparent, as open as possible. Obviously, if it's a confidential conversation, sure, those things have to happen. But as a rule, I tend to do things, particularly away from the job, in groups. So just
Right,
I would not go out with one guy to have a drink. It'd be a
right.
team, it'd be a group of folks. And what I find at the end of the day, it's just common sense. I treat women the way I want my daughters treated, the way I want my sisters treated, my mother treated, the women who mean something to me. And if you kind of have that as the common sense barometer, you'll do the right thing.
It's nice if you can network with families too. So if you can, if the other person has a significant other, LBGT or not,
Absolutely.
being able to say, hey, we could all go out for a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or whatever, but in couples too is another way to do that as well. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so it's such a complicated world now. Um, Anything else as an update for we talked about updates in terms of telling and selling your value and quantifying your worth and all that. What about other things in the modern world that you think about now that you didn't necessarily think about in writing your book?
Yeah, so in 2008, there was not a lot of virtual anything. There weren't Zoom meetings. There weren't, even pre-pandemic. I mean, these are technology has really integrated, and you have to be careful because in the old days when we all huddled at the office or we all had meetings in person, it was easy for those visibility moments. It was easier to kind of have those conversations. You have to be more intentional now, given the virtual work at home environment that I don't think we'll ever go back to the old days. And so again, how can you, make sure that who you are and what you and your team are doing can stand out in a virtual environment? I think that's very, very important. I think, again, I talked about, in 2008, almost having kind of that pull yourself up by the bootstrap mentality, where I would tell you now, it's about people, and you need to develop relationships and have a professional network, both inside your organization and outside, where people know about you. One of the things I will tell you, Bonnie, I don't know if you realize that, but many of the jobs I've gotten in my career wasn't because I answered a LinkedIn or it was because someone who knew me and they heard about this position. Keith would be great for that. And so you want to maintain that professional network. Again, that was something in 2008 that I wasn't very big on at the time, where I tell you today it's very important. And that even includes being part of outside organizations like the Executive Leadership Council or the National Black MBA. You want to have that professional network.
Great. And I have been focused because I assigned that book, Good is Not Enough, but you've written other books. Can you just quickly give us some highlights of the other books you've written? And I hear a rumor that there's another book in the works.
Great. Yeah. So my second book was called Corner Office Rules, The 10 Realities of Executive Life. And that book was written, Bonnie, because I saw a lot of great individual contributors, Black or white, male or female, who once they got to more middle and senior level, uh, didn't do as well. And that was because the things that made you successful as an individual contributor didn't necessarily play well when you're running and leading a team. And so that book just talks about some realities of leadership that, that person moving from a individual contributor to a leader has to address. And then the third book was a book of love I did with my oldest daughter. It was called Swag is Not Enough. And she's, the millennial generation. And so it was really more her book where at the end of each chapter, I would give the baby boomer perspective on things. But the book I'm most proud of and I'm working on right now, it's called Diversity is Not Enough. And it's really a book that I'm writing for organizations to say, hey, it's not enough to be intentional about diversity and inclusion. One, you're leaving out equity. So I believe it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you have to be intentional and deliberate, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but you have to be deliberate about it. And most of that revolves around being inclusive and making people feel comfortable and safe and a part of the organization. And so I talk about that, as well as for organizations who are serious about the advancement of Black and African American people. Here are things that you can do. Many organizations have things for women in place because, and rightfully so. But again, I think that there are times when, in times like now, where you really need to be more inclusive, intentional, and making sure that you're bringing the entire organization forward. So I'll talk about some examples for those folks. And then last but not least, the excuse I don't like most is we can't find any. We'll tell you where to go to find.
Excellent. And so if people want to stay informed and make sure they are aware when your book comes out, I would encourage them to go to your LinkedIn and connect with you on LinkedIn, anywhere, and your website.
Connect with me on LinkedIn at keithwyche.com. Absolutely. Those two places are the best place to connect with me.
Terrific. Any last thoughts about what you want to make sure people take into account? Best advice for moving ahead in their careers?
I would tell you, I'll go back to something I said earlier, and that is that you are the owner, the author, and the architect of your career. You do not want to be a backseat passenger in your own career. And it doesn't mean that you don't work with your boss, but you have to be intentional and deliberate about your own career. We spend more time planning our vacations sometimes than we do our careers. And so be mindful of that. Be mindful of having a career plan. What do you want to do with your career? Where do you want to go? Because without that career roadmap or that plan, you may find yourself in a good job with a bad company, or you may find yourself in a role that really doesn't help you get to where you're trying to go. And so I would just say be more intentional, more thoughtful, and take more ownership of your career.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we said at the very beginning of this interview, you have a heart for investing in other people and helping other people to learn from your mistakes and your wisdom and be able to do even better, and just to pull people up behind you. And I'm such a believer in that, and I admire that about you. So thank you for taking the time.
Bonnie, thank you so much for having me. And never forget, true leaders really look to create other leaders. And I'm blessed in my life to have people that I've mentored who have far exceeded my trajectory in rising corporate America. And now I look up to these folks not only as friends but colleagues. So absolutely.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Thank you so much.